Welcome to Globe Talk. Today we have in conversation the ambassador of a small country in the South America called Bolivia. When I say Bolivia, how many of you know what's the first thing? When I say Bolivia, how many of you know where the country is? How many of you can tell me the capital of that country? Let alone what are our trade ties with the country? There's a massive confusion. To sort that out, we have with us the ambassador of Bolivia, Mr. Sergio Arispe. Welcome to the show, sir.
Tanya, thank you for the interview, and thanks Businessworld for this possibility.
You're welcome. We're glad to have you on the show. So let's talk about India and Bolivia.
Okay.
Begin with Bolivia. Where do you think our trade ties are with Bolivia right now? Are you satisfied with the trajectory of what's happening between India and Bolivia in terms of bilateral trade?
There's a multitude of little questions inside your first, but I'll try to address them as quickly as I can and as best as I can. There's always space to improve, but I think you hit on a point that is medular, in the sense that not that many people know where Bolivia is. But I think this has to do with an issue that's structural. If you ask the common folk in India where London is, 9 times out of 10, everyone will know. But if you would ask that the seat of government is La Paz and the capital city of Bolivia is Sucre, I would say probably 1 out of 10 would be able to recognize it. It's not an exaggeration, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's natural to our historical issues, with our educational issues. Do they have to change? Obviously they have to change. Why? The sooner we stop seeing each other as exotic destinations, the quicker we'll be able to cooperate and link up better. Why? Because we are the future of the world.
Do you feel India and Bolivia have this high-headed idea of each other and themselves, that they are exotic destinations, so that sort of hinders the
But
progress?
I'm not talking exotic destinations in a positive aspect. You see Bolivia as this far-off country. We see India as this far-off country. How is this possible? We're in the midst of globalization. And this is very important to emphasize. Why? Because we have to understand that the sooner this is no longer the case, and our education brings us forward towards understanding the world as a complete and initially a prosperous place to do work with or negotiate with, the better we'll be together. Why? We all look towards the West. West, I'm talking about Europe, the US, the West. That's what we look for in terms of education, in terms of business, in terms of where we want to go. But is it where we want to go? And biologically speaking, will we be able to enter quicker into Latin America or into Europe? Let me give you a point. What's the median age of Europe? 46 years old. What's the median age of India? Less than 30. 27, I believe. What's the median age of Southeast Asia countries? Less than 30. What's the median age of countries in Latin America? Less than 30. Biologically speaking, Tanya, where is the future? In our countries. The sooner we know this, the sooner we'll work together. And the sooner the ties will naturally bind each other. Because if we work out to develop and to improve our quality of life, the sooner we'll be buying your products. The sooner my people will be selling in your markets. To me, history is very, very simple. History is cyclical. Up until the end of the 18th century, India and China were the biggest economies of the world. Through a brief stint, which we state as the colonial period, we didn't have this, but you're back. And you're here to triumph. And that's why countries such as us, with vast limitations, economic limitations, are here. Because we see the future of humanity in countries such as yours. And that's why it's an honor to be here.
So would you say that right now where India and Bolivia are, you would not be satisfied with the trajectory of the relations, and there's much more to it?
It's a natural point right now. We're here. We've opened up our embassy in 2012. We can't ask for more. I think that it's a natural process that we're at an initial phase. Could it get better? Obviously it's going to get better. We're projecting to have our Minister of Foreign Affairs here probably in the next month. This obviously is a step forward. It's a means to an end. It's a possibility to improve diplomatic ties. But as we wish to improve diplomatic ties, there's no other and more fundamental reason than to improve our economic ties. I'll give you one piece of mine that I think is very important for this. I think India will be, from what I've seen in terms of consumer patterns and the vastness of your markets here and how you've worked your markets and the maturity of them, you will be a marketplace for many countries such as mine. I think countries such as ours, if we're able to piggyback on the back of this gigantic elephant, it would be grandiose, because India would fulfill what it was and what it will be and what it is, a great place for business.
The first time the embassy was opened in 2012. What took so long? India is really strong in terms of trade ties with other South American countries. The highest, I think, with Mexico.
But it's not there yet. It's not there yet. I think you're focused on the region. And we understand why. You're playing a playing field which will define many things in the future of humanity. I think the region is that important. But I think that ties between India and Latin America need to be strengthened. You're talking about Mexico, you're talking about Brazil, okay, but who isn't there? Why aren't you in India? Why are the Koreans in India? Why are the Chinese in India? I mean in Bolivia. Why isn't India in Bolivia? That is still the remaining question. Can you do it? Obviously. Are we waiting for investments from India? Obviously. There are strategic manners why we should be together. Lithium, to us, first of all, the future in terms of energy storage. What is India going to do? It's going to require lithium. What is the largest natural reserve of lithium in the world? Bolivia. I've just read a couple of institutional papers, well-regarded papers, of course, and they state that the government and the private sector wants to have electric vehicle park by 2030. How is that possible if we don't link with countries such as mine? We need to be there. We need to strengthen these ties. And we need to not only look at lithium, we need to look at other things. We might not be the market you seek. We're only 11 million people in the world. But politically, we are very much intoned. I come from the multilateral scene. And when we, as G77 or as developing countries, would work on the multilateral stage, India was always there to support us, as it is a strategic partner. This has to be taken care of, and we have to see each other as definitely strategic partners politically and economically, because that is the role I think India must grow into.
Lithium, the bonding element between India and Bolivia.
Exactly.
We could peg our relationships on lithium, which is a very strong point. But talking about the roadblocks, what do you think are the roadblocks between enhancing the ties between our countries?
I think we must improve in simple steps. I think India must open an embassy in Bolivia, not just have a concurrent embassy like it does right now with Peru. I think it must open embassies not only in Bolivia but in the whole of Latin America. I think it's a region that is waiting for it and of course is worthy of it. I think the business environment that you will see in countries such as mine is easier than you think. I think there's an enormous plus between Indian businessmen and, for example, a European businessman. I think that it would be easier for an Indian businessman to understand the idiosyncrasies of my society and the way...
How would you suggest that? For us, Bolivia is this far-off land to which we could probably take a tour once in a lifetime. Yeah. And I think it would be vice versa, the exotic India for Bolivians. How do we bridge that gap?
I already see Indians making a living over there. I see Indians exploring possibilities, Indians doing well in Bolivia. I know Indians right now are increasing our bilateral trade from 3-4 years ago, around 100 million to close to 500 million now. Obviously, most of this is gold, but there's Indians already over there doing what they have to, opening bridges, taking their families, living in Bolivia. If I would drop you in Santa Cruz tomorrow, one of our economic hubs, you would say you're in parts of Mumbai. If you would go to a market, you would understand it. If you would see the way we drive, you would understand it. It wouldn't hinder your perception of reality. But if I take a European over there, perhaps it's a bit more obstructive to it, culturally. But Indians could perfectly understand and thrive in an environment
That's
such as
because
Bolivia.
Indians are really adaptive.
Exactly. So that unto itself is a big plus.
But you still didn't talk about the minus. What is it that is hindering it right now?
What's hindering it? I think
I mean, we could say there's no embassy in Bolivia, that there's no direct air contact. That could be one hindrance. But that's India point of view. You tell me the Bolivia point of view.
it goes both ways in the sense that both my government institutionally has to promote more capabilities here. We have to have a larger embassy. The amount of opportunities that I've had here in the past months, I've only been here since September, are enormous. I think my hands are tied in the sense that I can't physically do as much as I could. And as an ambassador, that is
Why would you
role.
say that? Why would you say
Because
that?
there's just so many opportunities. There's just so many business opportunities, cultural opportunities that I can't do because I'm physically limited in that sense. I think I need to bring more businessmen here. I need to bring more people to invest, to promote commerce between our both countries. And again, it has to do with educational aspects. We have to stop looking at each other as far-off destinations. You know that one of your biggest trade areas in the world is California. It's further than Bolivia. And you do still have to do a couple of layovers to go to California. So it's not a matter of distance. Distance is a matter that has to do with our imagination. Oh, the world we live in, you can no longer limit yourself by kilometers or miles that separate one from another, because that would create a barrier, it is, you've stated it time and time again. It's something I would go to perhaps once in a lifetime. I see businessmen doing a trip 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year. And they're making their ends. And they're probably doing a lot better than me and you. Why? Because they've chosen to tackle a country which might be seen as afar or exotic, but it's become friendly and familiar to them. First of all, Bolivia is one of the least violent countries in all Latin America. It's easy to do business. We've had a period of governance for the past 12 years under President Evo Morales, my president, which has given us the stability to seek to promote embassies such as this one here, because it's a cause and effect. Bolivia is growing at the fastest pace in South America compared to its neighbors. This has permitted us to now open our eyes and our diplomatic ties to the world, because we need you to keep on growing. So these are some of the, I think, essential aspects that we need to tackle. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of imagining that the distance is no longer there.
Let's move to bilateral visits.
Okay.
So next month there is a bilateral visit. But why is the frequency so low? Do you think, and could there be any invitation from Bolivia to our Prime Minister?
I believe that when a foreign minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs comes to a country, it's a prior step for the president to come. They might have not been as frequent as we want them to be, but then again, I've told you, it's a country starting to expand. Where's the first place you expand to as a country? Inside your region. Much like Modi ji did, right? When he came into office, the first thing he did, like never before, he was president in all the capitals of the surrounding countries, where most of the diaspora of India is. Well, Bolivia did the same. But you have to understand that historically, to now migrate from your region into probably the most important region of the world, Southeast Asia, India, is a challenge unto itself. Slowly, but surely will be here. When my foreign minister of foreign affairs comes, I'm pretty sure that the president will surprise us soon. Why? These missions have a means of prospecting, and when the president comes, you define certain details, and that's about it. And I'm sure that India is ready and willing to receive a president such as mine, and how important he's been to our country historically. I'm sure your prime minister is well aware of my president, and we are well aware of your president, what he's doing, and the benefits that his political strategies are reaping.
India, in terms of business, okay, have there been in the past, I think 4 months, by the time 4-5 months, the time you've been here, have there been coming up any new queries from Indian businessmen who want to travel to Bolivia, or any Bolivian businessmen that have approached the embassy, or in order to sort of understand India as a market or experience India?
Many.
Could we look at a delegation coming from Bolivia to India, a business delegation soon?
Why not? Many.
Is there anything on the cards actually?
Not at the moment precisely, but of course there are prospects of it. I want the mining sector to come to India to present our vast portfolio of minerals. I'm sure that India could benefit from them, considering the growth rates that you're expressing. This has to do with minerals being readily available to the developing scheme. I think that there's been a huge amount of interest from businessmen from India, leading businessmen. We're close to closing a deal with Tata going to Bolivia to explore lithium. It's actually one of my achievements that I've had these 4 months. I'm very proud of it. I think the Tata has the right idea. I think Tata is a leading global brand, and I always pull their chain. They say that they're not there enough in Latin America, and I'm there. Hey, let's open up a subsidiary in La Paz or in Bolivia. I think this is the future of business. I think that there's obviously a great interest in gold from your country to mine. There's an enormous amount of business traveling to Bolivia trying to find out means of acquiring gold. Many of them are starting to have institutional presence over there. It's an ongoing dynamic, but I must emphasize again, it takes time. I'm not here to tell you that things will become immediate achievements, because we're at a phase where I think both countries are starting to see each other as binding necessities. And because of this...
That's a very strong statement to make. How would you suggest that?
Why? If we seek to grow the way we want to, both you as a country and me as a country, we need each other. We don't only need Western civilization countries. We need developing countries. And we need developing countries to harness each other. Why are they binding? Who do you think would be easier to find technology transfer from? Europeans or Indians? Indians. Look at what you do in terms of pharmaceuticals to the world. Pharmaceuticals, Indian pharmaceuticals, are already present in Bolivia. Why? Because it's logical. You bring down the cost of public health. You do a great good to humanity in that sense. Your generic brands are well valued across the globe. It's one of the key issues that Modi speaks often. And you're being attacked many times by Western companies that see this as an aggression. But if it wasn't for this, can you imagine how much public debt it would increase for countries such as us that provide public health to its own people? Thanks to Indian pharmaceuticals, our costs of subsidies have gone down. And you do this through a natural process of needs, of binding needs.
There was a concern raised by a lot of medical pharmaceutical bodies in the US and the UK, which spoke about the quality of the Indian medicines produced in India and the ones that have been sent abroad.
Sure, you can badmouth your competition all you want, Tanya. But the truth of the matter is, you make high-quality pharmaceuticals. Testament to it, we take them on a regular basis in our pharmacies in Bolivia. Have we had issues? I'm sure all pharmaceuticals in the world have batches which probably aren't up to speed. But do you think that would define your sector? The criticisms come, and they will continue to come, because you're breaking away from their logic of making pharmaceuticals impossible to be acquired by the common folk. If you consider the medical tourism that you have here compared to other countries, why do people come? Because of the competitive prices.
Of course.
And they'll flock to this country.
Even from Pakistan, we have a huge medical tourism coming into India.
I've recently had a couple of Bolivian families come for organ transplants here in prices that we would find impossible to find in European countries.
Or even the US for that matter.
In a good manner, excellent healthcare. The people here left with a vision of medical assistance here in India, which is comparable to anything in the world. Sometimes I think we, as people that live in a country, tend to be caught in the day-to-day hustle and bustle, in the problems that we all have. But I think us, as the countries abroad, looking to India, we see nothing but hope.
That's a really strong statement again to make. Bolivia looks at India with a lot of hope. Let's talk about people-to-people contact. I mean, this is my favorite question whenever I interview an ambassador. I want to understand. So, what is the idea of India in a common man's mind in Bolivia? When you say India, what do they say? Namaste? Yoga?
Namaste, yoga.
How do they even know the capital city?
Yes, we know. Most of us do. Of course, there are many that probably don't. I think India is a...
Of course, India is a very big country as compared to Bolivia.
Yeah, the name is very...
exotic.
You hear Bollywood. You know, you see My Name is Khan movies. You see these beautiful men and women parading themselves in Bollywood movies. Bollywood is slowly but surely trying to insert itself into all of Latin American countries. I think the tone, the scenarios, just the joy of seeing most of these movies to us is perhaps something to rejoice. It's something that is a true envoy or diplomat of your culture. All these movies that are coming to Latin America.
They are really popular in Bolivia.
They are. Little by little, there's most people that are starting to see them. You know, you can have, I think, this movie called Bahubali. Bahubali was screened in Bolivia. These are examples of, you know, India to the world. I think you're positioning yourself in a strong manner more and more often. You have a very charismatic prime minister. It's natural. Like I told you, it's a natural development. And it has to do with you acquiring the status of a superpower, which you are certainly doing. And I think you have to believe in that more yourselves than we do at times. Because, like I told you, I think India has a position to fill in the world and to certainly balance out the sheet of power in the world. And we're hopeful of that. But I would say that we too have to work on the educational aspect to start seeing India as more of an ally than perhaps looking at the West. And I told you at the beginning of this interview why I think this is necessary. Because there's a huge amount of youth here. And we have a huge amount of youth over there. If we don't entice the youth to look at new frontiers, perhaps the frontiers where we're looking at right now don't have the room for them. But countries such as this, I believe, have room for plenty.
How can people-to-people contact be increased in terms of tourism? How can we promote tourism?
Look, I've looked into tourism lately, and I've been able to talk to some key players here in the tourist industry. We've gotten a huge spurt of growth from Japanese tourists, Chinese tourists. Not so much India. We've had a South Indian artist film one of his musical videos in the Uyuni salt plains. The Uyuni salt plains are starting to acquire a global status in terms of a place to go. Have you seen the last Star Wars movie?
I'm not a fan of Star Wars.
Good. But most of the youth probably have. There's a scene where all these spaceships are fighting. It's placed in Bolivia. It's in the Uyuni salt plains. It's a very beautiful natural scene. I've actually lived there with my wife, and it's a very beautiful place. It's being situated like the place to go in terms of obligated tourist stops in South America. You stated something that perhaps is true. If an Indian wishes to go to South America, perhaps they would like to do not just one country, because to go there, you wouldn't want to go there for 4 days. You would end up probably being there 10. So we're probably part of a circuit which would require you to go to Machu Picchu in Peru, the Salt Plains and Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, perhaps the Amazon. Then you would probably end up going to Argentina or Chile. But we also have to bear in mind why it's important to be in Bolivia. I think we need to start positioning Bolivia, and of course this is one of the objectives of my embassy, but it would obviously help when Businessworld covers us as a country. So I always would like to promote and would like to ask all those Indians that have done London, that have done Bangkok. We want travelers that have been in more than 10 countries. You know, the ones that want a selfie in a place that no one else has been to. For those travelers that seek something different, something genuine. You know why I liked India 5 years ago, when the first time I came to India? I told friends, there's a country which is still genuine. If you want a country which has those characteristics, look to us, look to Bolivia. I'm sure it will be a pleasant surprise.
Really kind of you to say. One last question, actually. India has now been ranked in one of the top 100 countries to do business very easily. Does that sort of change Bolivia's view for India, or has it always been a very welcoming? It really hasn't been, but just in the minds of people, has it always been very welcoming?
I think we've gone beyond these editorials. I think how many missions and embassies you have in Delhi? It's one of the most... Okay, it's probably one of the most important capitals of the world. Yes. From an embassy point of view and from a government point of view. Of course, a country such as India is a place to look forward to do business with. I think the Western world is kind of assuming, because it's taking over some of them. I always tell some of my students when I used to teach, I actually had a meeting with the youth here, and I told them, that a recent a big name of yours has acquired Land Rover, has acquired Jaguar. You know why so? Because they're bigger than them. Why did Tata acquire Land Rover? Because Tata is bigger than Land Rover, and thus, I think right now you're the seventh largest economy in the world. Seventh largest economy. You're due to be the third largest economy by 2025, 2030. Okay, how is it not good to have business here? I mean, to not be here is, I think, a contradiction unto itself. Of course, India is a great place to do business in.
Lithium is a gateway to India and Bolivia relationship. Winding up on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of BW Global.